Our second service is about to begin. Welcome to folks online and here on the Oval. We're going to open with welcoming and creepy music for today. Welcome, all you people and scallywags. Are you ready for the service to get started? Let's begin with a joke. What is a pirate's favorite letter? R. Nay, mateys, it be the sea, it be the sea. Is it better to take or to give? Well, this pirate says it's better to give. Can't be completely out of character. Welcome, one and all. You may not recognize me, but I'm Alison Miller, the minister of the Morristown Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, and I invite you to join with me in the affirmation that we often share when we are together. It goes like this: it is good to be. It is good to be here. It is so good to be here together. Let's say it together. It is good to be. It is good to be here. It is so good to be here together. And I'll say this: if it's good to be in the shade for you, you can be in the shade. If it's good to be in the sun for you, you can be in the sun, and you can change your mind and move around during the service. Welcome, one and all. And now I invite Tish Hamilton, our Sunday associate, to share some announcements this morning.
Good morning. My name is Tish Hamilton. I'm here today actually as New York City Marathon Tish. Nice. You can call me that. It's my costume, not costume. Welcome to the Morristown Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. We are a spiritually alive, justice-centered, and inclusive community. Yes, We are so glad you're here. I do have a couple of announcements to share. Today is the last day to offer an event or an item for the annual service auction, which will happen on Sunday, November 14th. And I see Paul waving his hat over at the table, at the service auction table. So please visit him after the service, and Donna too, a little bit more shy with her waving, to find out more about the auction. Next week, our Odyssey project launches at 1 p.m. in our sanctuary and on Zoom. All are invited to come and hear Betsy Burr's Odyssey and to be able to ask questions afterwards. Our offering today will be split between our fellowship and New Jersey Together. Thank you for your generosity.
I'd love to invite the Mesias family to come forward and to lead us in our chalice lighting. And you'll find the words in your order of service. Here is our children's chalice lighting. You and your brother's mouth together? Up high, you guys.
We light this chalice because we are Unitarian Universalists. We are the fellowship of the open mind, the loved hearts, and open hands. Together we bring peace and justice to the earth.
Oh, you know what you can say? You could do something. You want to say, I love the light of this chalice? No? Okay, she said she wanted to. What do you want to say? Anything? No? Okay. We love the light of your face. How about that? Thank you. And let us rise in body or in spirit and sing the words of our opening song, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In.
Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your ears to the song. Open your ears to the song. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your hearts, everyone. Open your hearts, everyone. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Don't be afraid of some change. Don't be afraid of some change. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Excellent. You may be seated, I guess. That feels very... Good morning. Welcome to the fellowship this lovely Halloween morning. I see some of you are dressed up a little bit. As you've seen, our children were dressed at the earlier service, and they're still having their Halloween party over there, and we're very excited that they are here with us. Halloween is a holiday that started out dressing up to hide from death, right? The origins of Halloween is that we would dress up so that the spooky spirits wouldn't come and get us, right? That's the origins of it. Now it's become a great day to go around and get candy. It's great. It's a fun day. in a way, we've taken this holiday that started out of a fear of death and turned it into a joyful one. And that's what we want to talk about today. That's the point of the service here today. We're going to talk about the different ways in which various faiths and traditions handle death. When we were putting together this service, death seemed to be a very important thing for us to talk about. As we are still out, and we know by being outside and not inside, as people are masked here as well, still in the midst of a global pandemic. One that has claimed many, many lives. One that has thrust the conversation of death upon us. And a lot of the conversations around that pandemic and how to deal with it, whether the mask or the vaccine or whatever, come around death and what we do with that. How many people will die if we were to mask or not mask, or vaccine or not vaccine, right? It's all about this idea of losing our loved ones. And we as a society sometimes aren't very good at dealing with death. I think it's the importance of religion. A lot of religions began in early human history to deal with this very question. What happens when we die? Where do we go? What happens to our body? How do we deal with that grief? And how to answer those questions. So we're going to talk a little bit about the context, and then we're going to do some activities here in a little bit to talk about it. But I first want to share a bit of advice that I learned from my family and my upbringing. As I get to know some of you all and you all get to know me, I like sharing these kind of personal stories. My grandparents, when I was very young, bought a cemetery plot at the cemetery by their house in Poughkeepsie, New York, up on the Hudson River. And we would go to it all the time because it was a lovely spot. We'd go and picnic. We'd look over the Hudson. It was awesome. It was great. And we had this idea that, like, at some point, my grandma and grandpa, who I loved to hang out with, who would do fun stuff with us, were not going to be with us anymore. And from a young age, we had those conversations over and over again, because what else are you going to do when you're at the cemetery but talk about why you're at a cemetery? And so we had those conversations. And when my grandparents died, one of the things we knew in those conversations is that my grandmother said that if she died first, and then my grandfather would die afterwards, Joe, we would have to dig her up, put him underneath, so that he would get to the worms would get to him first, because she was very worried about the worms once she had died. A strange thing to have a conversation with a 7-year-old about, but that's what we did in my family. And so when she did finally die, and luckily for her, my grandfather did, or luckily for us, I guess, my grandfather did die first, and then she followed a few months later in kind of those classic stories of a long married couple who one died and the other went right after that. So we were doing the funeral for my grandmother, and I was leading it as the religious professional in my family. I do funerals, weddings, those kind of things, baptisms. And my brother's an accountant. He does all our taxes. I do all the kind of religious stuff. And so I was leading the funeral there at the chapel at the cemetery there, at the Poughkeepsie Rural Cemetery, and overlooking the Hudson. And I remember looking around, and there wasn't a lot of sadness in the room. My grandmother had lived a very good life, and she had prepared for this moment. She told us every year that it was going to be her last Christmas. For 20 years, it was going to be her last Christmas. She was ready for this, not because she wanted it, not because she was hoping it would come, but she knew it was inevitably coming, and we were all there. And so finally, Grandma was in the ground with Grandpa in the place that they had picked many years before to be theirs. We were prepared for death, and it made the loss that much easier. I remember seeing her as she was dying. She had cancer, and she was just getting smaller. And if you've seen anyone who's died of cancer, just kind of shrink in this bed and become immobile. And I wasn't super sad because I knew she was ready for it. And she had told me when my grandfather had died that she was ready to go too. That's why she stopped taking her meds for that cancer. We talked about death. And it was super important because when it came, it wasn't scary. Now, my other side of the family, that's my dad's side of the family, my mom's side of the family, they're an irreverent bunch. And they are also not super scared of death because they like to tell jokes about it. A lot of sarcasm, a lot of shenanigans. And they come from this matriarch. Her name is Nellie, my grandmother, Grandma Nellie. And she was a lifelong Methodist. And in her Methodist church, they had one of these, like, we're going to take everyone in the church's pictures, as they do in a lot of churches. And someone talked her into getting a 20 by 30 headshot of herself at 85 years old. And on the back, and so she hung it in her house. It was the silliest thing ever. She would sit in this chair in front of her, and there, like 3 times the size of her behind her, was this big picture of herself. It was wild. So when she died, we went to her house, and on the back of a lot of things, she had written the names of who she wanted things to go to. And on the back of that picture, she'd written my uncle's name on it. My uncle did not want this 20 by 30, 3 times the size picture of Grandma, even though we all love Grandma very much. And so my Uncle Steve wrote on a piece of tape my brother's name, stuck it to the back of the thing. And so somehow it ended up in our house for a little bit. And so now we've taken this picture, this ridiculous picture that is so weird that she had this giant picture. And we take it and we put different names on people. Whoever gets married, buys a new house, they end up with this picture of Grandma Nellie, and it passes around the family. Now, no one wants it, so we have to, like, sneak it in. And so, like, we'll shove it into the trunks of people's cars as they're leaving Thanksgiving. But whenever we do it, so it's this kind of silly thing we've come around Grandma Nellie, but whenever it happens, we inevitably end up telling the stories of Grandma Nellie, of the cookies she used to bake and cinnamon rolls. She was a great baker. She was a terrible cook, but a great baker. Or the times that we would get into trouble at her house. And one time my cousin brought in a live snake and it, like, got out in her living room, and how, like, kind of calm and chill she was about it, and how loving she was towards her great-grandchildren. We celebrated her life every time her death kind of got brought up through this picture. I think one of the things that we need to remember as a society, and one of the things that religious institutions can offer in a healthy way, that different practices can happen in a different way, is to celebrate life through death. To not be afraid of death, that it is part of the story of our lives, and that we can celebrate it after the fact. So today we are going to continue to celebrate those. I don't know if some folks have put some pictures up on our little altar here. If you have any, feel free to add them as we celebrate the lives of people who we come across. So we're going to continue to do that today, but thank you.
That's right. If you've brought any photographs or mementos, you're welcome to put that on our altar here today. It is the time in our service where we honor the milestones, the joys and sorrows that have happened in the lives of our fellow congregants since we last met. Some come in through emails, some come in through our milestones and passages cards, and we make space for them in our service. The first is from Joan Bells, the chair of our Immigration Justice Ministry. Please hold in your prayers the Afghan refugee family of 5 whose odyssey has brought them to our doorstep. As soon as the resettlement agency in Elizabeth has completed their processing, this lovely family will be with us in Morristown until permanent housing in Boonton is available. Let us hold this Afghani family in our hearts, and soon we shall hold them in our loving actions of compassion and welcome and support. May they feel warmly greeted in the days and weeks ahead. The second one is about Nancy Lee McClure, that many of you may know, who runs our book book club. And this is about Nancy's son, Jeremy Duder. He struggles with neurofibromatosis and is very ill. And it seems there may be little time left. And he's in a lot of pain. Let us surround Nancy Lee McClure, who may be online today or may be watching later, and the entire family. And let us hold Jeremy Duder. May he be buoyed up by the love of his family and friends. May it bring him well springs of strength and a feeling of peace to counter the pain. And we hold our beloved Nancy in our hearts. May she find renewing strength and courage to continue to surround her son with love. May she feel and know she is not alone. May it be so. We acknowledge in this space other milestones that are with us, perhaps too new or raw or private to share. If they are joyful, may you find companions to celebrate with. And if they are sorrowful, may you find companions to comfort and hold you in this time. And now Tish is going to share our story for all ages, The Memory Tree.
This metal clangs around when I walk. I just want to, before I share the story, I just want to share something that today, of course, is Halloween, and my grandmother actually passed on Halloween, and that sounds sad, but you know what? She was 100 years old, so that is quite an accomplishment. And if it, transmutes down to me, then you guys have got 40 more years with me. The story is called The Memory Tree by Britta Teckentrup. There once was a fox who lived with all the other animals in the forest. Fox had lived a long and happy life, but now he was tired. Very slowly, Fox made his way to his favorite spot in the clearing. He looked at his beloved forest one last time and lay down. Fox closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and fell asleep forever. Everything around Fox was still and peaceful. Snow began to fall, gently covering him with a soft blanket. Owl had watched Fox from the top of his tree. He flew down and landed next to his friend. Owl was very sad. He had known Fox for a long time, but Owl knew the time had come for his friend to leave. One by one, Fox's friends came to the clearing. First Squirrel and Weasel, then Bear, Deer, and Bird, and finally Rabbit, Mouse, and others came to sit by Fox. Fox had been loved by everyone. He had been kind and caring. No one could imagine life in the forest without him. The animals sat in silence a long time. Owl was the first to speak. He smiled warmly and said, "I remember when Fox and I were very young. Every autumn, we raced to see who could catch more falling leaves." The other animals remembered and smiled. Mouse said softly, "I remember how much Fox loved the sunset. He always sat at this exact spot." The animals remembered. Many of them had joined Fox watching the sun go down. It was a happy memory, and their sad hearts filled with warmth. Bear remembered how Fox had looked after her cubs one spring. Rabbit smiled when she told the story of how Fox had played tag with her in the tall grass. Squirrel talked about Fox helping him dig up buried nuts in the deep snow last winter. One by one, the animals remembered their favorite stories about Fox. Fox had touched the lives of all the animals in the forest with his warmth and kindness, and they all smiled, remembering. While the animals talked, a little orange plant grew out of the snow where Fox was lying. Small and delicate at first and hardly noticeable, the plant grew bigger, stronger, and more beautiful with each story. The animals talked about Fox all through the night, and in the morning, the little plant had grown into a small tree. The animals saw the tree and knew that Fox was still a part of them. During the next days, weeks, and months, the animal remembered many more stories about Fox. Their heavy hearts began to feel lighter. The more they remembered, the more the tree grew, higher and more beautiful, until it was the tallest tree in the forest, a tree made from memories and full of love. Fox's tree was big and strong enough to shelter all the animals. It was always buzzing with life. The birds built their nests among the leaves, and Owl raised his grandchicks on the branches. Squirrel found a cozy home in the trunk, and Bear, Deer, and Rabbit slept in the shade. The tree gave strength to everyone who had loved Fox. And so, Fox lived on in their hearts forever.
Our offering begins with a musical offering. Thank you, Miles Gorman. Remember Me by Kristen Anderson Lopez and Robert Lopez. And this is also the time where we share our financial offerings, 50%, which will go to support our ministries here at the fellowship, and 50% we'll be sharing with New Jersey Together, an interfaith organizing network that includes our congregation, organizing for affordable housing, access to health care, and reforms in criminal justice around racial disparities. Thank you for your generosity.
Remember me, though I have to say goodbye. Remember me, don't let it make you cry. For even if I'm far away, I hold you in my heart. I sing a secret song to you each night we are apart. Remember me, though I to travel far. Remember me, each time you hear a sad guitar, and know that I am with you in the only way that I can be, until you're in my arms again. Remember me. Remember me, though I have to say goodbye. Remember me, don't let it make you cry. For even if I'm far away, I hold you in my heart. I sing a secret song to you each night we are apart. Remember me, though I have to travel far. Remember me, each time you hear a sad guitar, know that I am with you in the only way that I can be, until you're in my arms again. Remember
Kristen and Robert Lopez, who composed that song, wrote this: "It's the power of music to bring people back to life, literally and figuratively." The dark half of the year is said to begin at this time. It's the time when the hours of the night grow longer than the hours of the day. It's the time when the final harvest is reaped, when that last delicious apple is picked. And in more ancient times, when herd animals would have been killed and their meat preserved for food over the winter. It is now, and was in ancient times, the last gasp of summer, a time of parties and revelry, as well as a time of fear as winter drew near and people wondered, will we all survive? Do we have enough to stay warm and fed through the harsh and cold days to come? Before Halloween traditions arose in Northern Europe, the Celts called this liminal time Samhain, which means summer's end. In the 1970s and 1980s, Unitarian Universalists were inspired by earth-centered traditions, including by the Celts and the Druids. And they began to re-examine, reflect on, and renew our practices at this time of year. Out of Christianity, our parent heritage, we were already familiar with All Saints' Day and All Souls' Day, November 1st and November 2nd. These are the days set aside to honor our spiritual ancestors, sometimes called saints, familial ancestors, and ancestors of all kinds. Altars with candles and images alongside of prayers for the deceased mark these days. We Universalists tend to favor All Souls' Day rather than All Saints' Day, believing that it is right to honor all departed souls and not just some. We've never been a tradition who separated humankind into two places, but have faithfully moved in word and in deed to embody the notion that all our fates are intertwined here on earth, and on a day like today to affirm our fates are intertwined in the hereafter. These Christian holidays were moved to this time of year from their original dates in the spring because of the power of the practices that existed in this time of transitioning from one season to the next. Women in particular in our religious tradition were looking to reclaim the divine feminine and to connect with the natural cycles of birth and life and death that mirrored their personal experiences. Right up above me in the circular window is a place that was named Women's Space. And right there, people began to experiment with new traditions, grounding them to the wisdom of nature and the wisdom of time. And soon, people of all gender identities joined them in their quest. European pagan traditions called out to them, and they began to celebrate this highest of holidays, the witches' New Year, All Hallows' Eve, Samhain. While there are witches' costumes that you can buy in a store, the original witches were often powerful women with knowledge of healing herbs and the ways of the world and nature. The Christian church was at one point dominated by men, and these men feared and misunderstood and were ignorant of how these women knew what they knew and wanted to get rid of them as they viewed them as a threat to their power. And so we have the Salem witch trials and other stories that are recounted at this time. The Northern Europeans were far from the only people who observed festivals and celebrated ancestors at this time of year. In Mexico, the holiday El Dia de los Muertos is a time when families create altars called ofrendas with images and mementos of those who have gone before. You'll often find marigolds placed on those altars. It is said that the fragrance of the flower helps guide an ancestor to find the table that is set for them. Another image of the holiday are the decorated skulls, the calaveras, which sometimes come in the form of candied sugar skulls that children delight to eat. There is a sense of confronting death, embracing it, even mocking it. Yes, one day I will die, but today I will eat you. We see that too, even in more lighthearted customs like children dressing up as skeletons for Halloween. Around the world, nature teaches us that this is a time when life and death do hang in the balance. Costumes, customs, lighthearted traditions, and more serious religious observances have us reckon with that truth. We are like the leaves on the trees, fated to be born, to grow, to share a range of color and beauty, to give it away each and every day, until one day we let go, fall to the earth, and return to the ground like the leaves falling right now. The love we have given away while we lived will nourish the soil and life for the next generation. So was the story of that fox. So is our story. The Celts and the Druids, from whom many of the Samhain traditions are received, like others, believed that this was a time when the veil between the worlds was thin, meaning it was a time when they could commune with their ancestors. One of the earliest dressing up traditions this time of year grew out of people dressing up as animals and monsters, and as Nick said, so as not to be kidnapped by the mischievous spirits. But they welcomed their kin and kindred spirits. In fact, in the Middle Ages, a tradition developed of hosting ancestors for dinner. They would open their doors and windows, and here we are outside. We don't even have to do that, so that they would have easy entrance. And adults would share the news of the past year with their departed beloveds, and children would entertain their ancestors with games. The end of October and the beginning of November continue to provide us with humorous and serious reminders that life is so, so very precious. That indeed, on what may be one of the last Sundays, the last warm Sundays, that we should celebrate. We should celebrate the mere fact of being alive and sharing in the warmth of community with songs and stories, games and customs and rituals. As the world will go to sleep shortly, and ancient people wondered, would it ever wake again? It is also a time to remember those who have gone before and who have shared their love and light with us, or with our parents, or with their parents, or who have shared their love and the light with the communities with whom we identify, our spiritual and communal ancestors. And this time of a pandemic brings the need for this kind of annual practice to the foreground in a way that maybe it never has quite before. Some years, the losses outweigh the joy. And other times, the updates to our ancestors are frightening and filled with sorrow. And yet other years, when they visit, tales of joy provide the dominant note. Perhaps as we revisit the lives of our ancestors, we will be able to find in their stories an updated sense that overall there is a kind of balance and harmony in the universe, or at the very least, a kind of strength and resilience that provides us with the light and insight to make it through hard times. This year, the global update is hard. Our global human family this week reached the milestone of losing 5 million people to the coronavirus. And 750,000 people have died from coronavirus in the United States. Just yesterday, we lost 1,345 people here in the United States, and over 7,298 people died from coronavirus around the world. But did you know that just yesterday, 10,000 babies were born in this country? And over 385,000 babies were born around the world? This is the crux of what it means to be human. Like the marigold on an ofrenda, like the rose that we hand our children during a baby naming and blessing, we are full of life and beauty, and oh, so fragile. Each day is precious. Each day here in this community, someone experiences a loss and someone else a joy. Sometimes that loss is as great as death or as joyful as birth. We were made for joy and woe. And sometimes, like today, as we parade around in costumes, as we celebrate our dead, and as we mourn the lives cut short by a pandemic, we experience both. It was 33 years ago tomorrow that I, as a 9th grader, took my father to the hospital with chest pain and called my mother to come meet us there. 3 days later, he went to sleep forever, like the fox. I howled in grief as I imagined some of the fox's friends did, even as others sat quietly beside him. But you know, that same day was my brother's 13th birthday. And I could feel both in that moment on that day, a deep sadness that life would never be the same without my father, and a desire to celebrate my brother. A friend helped me get to the supermarket and buy an Entenmann's cake and candles. And when I returned, we sang "Happy Birthday." Life and death hanging in the balance on that day, like they do every day. And yet, at this time, we testify to a miracle, that life continues in spite of death, and that love conquers even grief. That although my son never met my father, he knows him through stories, and he knows him through me, and who I am because of how my father helped shape me to be. It is so amazing and awe-inspiring that in spite of harsh winters, in spite of so many forces, that our ancestors, on the whole, survived more often than they died, even in the harshest of times, even when food was scarce, even through war and other trials. Another Samhain practice is to let the fire in the hearth of your home go out and to join with the community to light a new fire that you take a piece home and rekindle your hearth from. A symbol that while the sun wanes and moves away from us in winter, eventually the light and the warmth and the sun return. The joy comes once again. So let us celebrate the waning light and the waning warmth, and let us rekindle a fire with the warmth of our community, and let each one of us take back a bit of the light and the warmth of this people. And may we grow stronger and more resilient and more ready to face whatever winter brings forth with all that power and all that light kindling within. May it be so. And will you rise in body or in spirit and sing our next song, Spirit of Life? We'll be singing it in English and in Spanish, and Stearns will be leading us by sharing the words in Spanish first. And for those that are newer, this is one of the most familiar songs in the Unitarian Universalist tradition.
Will you repeat after me? Fuente de amor, ven hacia mí, y al corazón, cántale tu compasión. Sopla al volar, sube en la mar, hasta moldear la justicia de la vida. This is my favorite word. Arraigame, libérame, fuente de amor, ven a mí, ven a mí. Beautiful. We'll sing it once in English and then once in Spanish. Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me. Fuente de amor, fuente de amor, ven hacia mí, y al corazón, cántale tu compasión. Sopla al volar, sube en la mar, hasta moldear la justicia de la vida. Arraigame, life, come to me, come to me. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
So we're about to, I invite you to be seated as I explain the closing ritual for today. We're gonna begin by lighting 5 candles. One is for our familial ancestors. One is for our community's ancestors. One is for our spiritual ancestors. And the final 2 candles are to honor, and the reason that there are 5 candles. The 5 million departed because of COVID around the world, and the 750,000 departed in the United States. And then following the lighting of the 5 candles, I'm going to invite you to head over to the table over here, and we have a veil that is blowing a little bit in the wind, symbolizing the veil between us and the hereafter. And I invite you to go to the table, and you can take a pen and write on the flash paper a word, maybe a word about a gift from your ancestor that you want to invite into your life. And I'll mention one. I have a great-great-aunt, Florence Fenwick Miller, who fought for women's suffrage. And I admire her strength. That's a word I might write, strength, and invite that strength to flow through me and for it to rise through the veil, to burn in the flames, and may she continue to have her strength fed in the hereafter. So we light our first candle for our familial ancestors. May all the gifts that were known through them on earth, may some of them find their way into our hearts and hands and minds and feet and bodies, and may we bless the world with those gifts. The second candle is for our community's ancestors. And today I lift up one Stephen Wiley, a lay leader here who was the lawyer who fought for our schools to be integrated in 1972. For Stephen Wiley and for all those, he was also a poet who moved greater justice and greater beauty across our county and world. And the third candle is for our spiritual ancestors. I invite you to bring to mind any prophet or spiritual teacher that is with you. And may the gifts and the wisdom you have known through that teacher flow also through your heart and through your life. And then we light a candle for the 750,000 departed souls, and I'll call one name. The oldest woman in our congregation, who was a great teacher, who was almost 100 years old, by the way, Tish, passed away from COVID. May her light nourish us to this day. Sunny Riley, we call you through the veil. See, she's playing right now. There we go. She was a force. And fifth, the incomprehensible loss of 5 million people. May all the families who are grieving a raw and near death, especially because of the pandemic, be surrounded by comfort and compassion, and may they indeed come to know that love is the greatest legacy, and that love is what we know of the eternal. And today I invite you to rise and to offer a blessing and then to call you to that table. Once more, to write a word that connects you with your ancestor. And let us fill this space with the spirits of those who nourish the fertile soil of our lives today. And as the cool breeze of autumn whips through this space, may you find that this end of summer gives you opportunities to celebrate and to experience fully the warmth and the joy of community, of holidays, and of the beloveds, both here and those gone. And just maybe an invitation into those holy and sacred moments where the natural world teaches us of something more than what we could possibly know alone. May the wind for you form, as it does for me at times, the hand of one on your cheek. Sometimes I swear I can feel my Father in the wind in that way. And when you are alone and lonely, and as we have been separated from the pandemic, may the light from our hearth and the warmth of this community companion you wherever you go and throughout even the longest winter. Amen and blessed be, and go with peace, a peace of light, a peace of love, a peace of all. You may walk towards the table and let us, as I said, fill with kindred spirits this beautiful space.